So if we go into our Finder window, we now have a folder called Backups, and you can see we have this backup data that's been created. And there's also a databases folder, but this is basically an encrypted version of the database. So technically, when you do this backup, you can extract the data, but it's no good to you because it's all encrypted. The backups are encrypted. They're encrypted using the basically the end-to-end encryption key that the phone stores in a secured location on the phone. So if you have like a full file system access, you can extract the encryption key they're using and potentially decrypt all this stuff. But the problem is we don't have root access to the phone, so we can't extract the encryption key that's on the phone right now. So even though this is a backup, we literally can't do anything with it because it's encrypted. There's nothing we can do with it because we don't have the encryption key. So our goal here is like, well, is there a way for us to create a backup such that we do have the encryption key? Because if we can do that, then guess what? We can then decrypt these backups and actually get the chat message data. So that's what we're going to try to do right now. So if I flip back over to this, if you'll notice at the end here, there's this end-to-end encrypted backup option. So if I select this, it's going to walk me through this process of creating an encrypted backup. And what you'll see is there's a use passkey option, but we don't want that. What we want to use is we want to use the more options. And specifically, we want to use the 64-digit encryption key. So if I select this, what's going to happen is the app is going to give me an option to generate a 64-digit key, which I'll generate, which is what we have right here. And so I can copy this. I don't know if this worked, but I'm curious to see if this will, let's see, EB335126, EB335. Yeah, look at that. That's great. So I was able to even copy this content through Visor. So this is what we want here. I'm going to save that. So this is once we continue, this key right here is now going to be the encryption key used for the backup process. So this is another thing that's really important in this LLM stuff. You can basically prompt the AI in such a way now where you can have it basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to reverse how these LLMs tend to work. A lot of these LLMs, they tend to just kind of make a lot of assumptions and kind of decide on their own, like different, there's like all these different coin flips and all these different branches that it could take in decision making. It tends to just make those decisions on its own. So what we want to do is we want to kind of flip it in the reverse and make it to where try to get the AI to basically, anytime it comes to a fork in the road where there's some kind of decision it needs to make, we want it to ask us for input on that. We don't want it to necessarily decide for itself. So we want it to basically interview us about details, and then it takes that information and then populates a solid forensic plan. So here I'm going to say relentless, and this is why I put it in the skill prompt when I told it to create the skill. We kind of covered the basics of Docker, so let's dive into kind of some of the forensic utility here. There's two sides to Docker in terms of forensics. There's the investigation side where you run across a system that has Docker installed or has a containerized system installed. So you need to kind of think about it from a forensic perspective. What are we actually analyzing here? What are we looking for forensically? And then you have the utility purpose, which is, well, we can use Docker ourselves to help us do forensics. So things like, create these sort of Python scripts that are containerized, or even a series of Python scripts within a container. Or we can use it for, like we said, deploying an elk stack to help with analysis, or use it to deploy block to timeline, all these kinds of things that we can use it for from a utility perspective. But the thing to keep in mind is Docker containers are their own little universes. So if you run into an operating system that has Docker on it and you discover that it had 5 or 6 running containers, well, you've got a little bit of work on your hands potentially, because each one of those containers is basically like an individual examination that needs to be conducted, because they have their own artifacts, they have their own basically operating system layer. So you're going to go through the process of basically examining, each one of those containers like it's its own system that needs to be analyzed. They can also have custom logging. So if you're used to seeing traditional forensic artifacts and traditional logging, like Windows event logs, things like that, well, because of the nature of containers, the person who put the container together can have and construct customized logging systems. So you just have to be aware of okay, does this application output any custom logging? And that's where that container inspect command comes in, because that container inspect will help you understand if there's any customized logging that's being output or something like that. Another thing to keep in mind too is because you can do what are called volume mounts. There is a way to construct a container so that it stores files on the host file system. So what that means is like data associated with the container can be located both inside the container and outside the container. And again, this is where you need to think about that container inspect command, because that will tell you, like, that'll give you information as to, like, is it mounting any file system points? Is it pushing any data directly out to the file system, or is it just storing everything internally for itself? And so let's take a look at Mac OS here and see what it put together for this. So, it's showing us like the different locations for account authentication to show us different, where do we get different records about users that are authenticating onto the system. Program executions, putting us at unified logs, Spotlight, Knowledge C databases, file access and manipulation. It's pointing you at the sort of recent stuff in the shared file list, in a plist file. It's showing you trash metadata related to the DS store file, which is really useful. File system events log is super useful in cases like this where you're trying to understand how a user accessed your managed files. So, and also Spotlight. Spotlight's super useful for file metadata on Mac OS. So basically what this is demonstrating, and just to give you an idea, I didn't write any of this. This was stuff that the LLM put together. So what's really cool about this, it's also demonstrating that at least at a basic level, these LLMs are aware of the typical digital forensics artifacts that we like to look at and the different logging systems we like to look at. So what that means is this is a really good system to help you plan out these investigations. And also, let's say you don't have the LLM put the plan together. Maybe you put your own plan together, and then you can have the AI actually review your plan and basically give you suggestions on other things you should consider, other things you should add to the investigation, other artifacts you should consider. The one thing the LLM I think is going to fail at, if you're skeptical about this process or you're not sure if you're comfortable using it, one of the things that it might fail at is it's not going to be necessarily good at making connections. Like, it's not going to like take all of your context and take all these artifacts and put together a chain of analysis that you need to do to make more complex connections about what the user is doing. It's going to give you these very like straightforward one-off log review systems or artifact review processes, but it's not necessarily going to say, hey, look at this artifact and look at this artifact and look at this artifact and review these different points of information from these artifacts, put them together to come up with sort of a more complex assessment of what a user may have done on the computer, or a complex assessment of what malware was doing on a computer. I don't think these LLMs are quite to that degree, quite to that level yet of chain of logic, but that's okay because that's what you're for. That's what our job is. But in terms of just getting this raw, like factual information about, where different artifacts are located, where they're at, what they represent, what kind of data they have, like this is the sort of thing that these LLMs are really good at. And, you're, in this part of the phase, you're using it to basically help you get things to point at, to point at things that you want to look for and that sort of thing. Let me kind of explain and set the stage here for what a forensic protocol is. So typically in a lot of civil litigation work related to digital forensics and e-discovery, a forensic protocol is something that's pretty common that's used the best way to describe it is basically some kind of document that just outlines the forensic work that's going to be conducted by the forensic examiner or a team of forensic examiners. And the main purpose behind it is so that if you're in an adversarial litigation where you've got a plaintiff and a defendant, and you've got some digital evidence or data that's at the center of that litigation, you got parties that want access to data, you got parties that want to protect data, you've also got relevancy issues in terms of what data needs to be provided that's actually relevant to the case. And what a forensic protocol does is just adds some defined structure to the work that we're actually going to conduct as forensic examiners or forensic experts. And what the protocol does is it allows us to write down the processes, procedures, and actual steps we're going to take so that both parties have something to review and negotiate around and agree to and put in place so that everybody is happy with the process that's going to occur. The reason this is needed in a lot of cases, because frankly, there's a couple of reasons, but for one, it's a big help to both parties, the attorneys on both sides, where they're not forensic experts, so they don't know the things that we are capable of doing all the time. They don't know exactly what we can do, what we can't do, and so when somebody like us gets hired to help in these cases, a lot of attorneys are just really unsure about what the work is actually going to be and what it's going to look like when we do it. They have no idea what our processes are. They have no idea how we're going to search through and segregate data and that sort of thing. So the forensic protocol, it gives them something that it gives them a legend or a rubric to use to understand how we're actually going to conduct the work we're going to conduct. And it also gives them some peace of mind to say, okay, this is the standard and the steps and processes through which the forensic experts are going to be held accountable. So it basically gives them some peace of mind to say, okay, now I understand exactly how my client's data is going to be reviewed. I understand exactly how my client's data is going to be processed and produced. It gives them basically a strong sense of how to understand the forensic process and how their client's data is going to be managed. I think this is kind of going to be the future of a lot of application work in forensics. I think, you know, we went through this period of where, you know, we've been very reliant on commercial tooling to parse data for us, where we're like, okay, there's this data set on this forensic image. I don't know how to parse it. There isn't a parser, so we'll wait for one of the vendors to come out with a feature or a parsing utility for this data. And I think going forward, because of what AI is allowing us to do, what it's unlocking for us, we don't have to wait for vendors to build tools for us anymore. In the past, it was either somebody who knew how to program or knew how to write code would maybe write an open source utility or something, throw it up on GitHub, and then we'd use it. Now, with AI and how good AI is at writing code and examining data and teaching us how to do things, you know, we can just about anybody can now write open source tools or utilities, or just write them for yourself. You don't even have to share them. Just have AI help you build utilities for yourself that you use to solve these little problems that you come up that you run into when you're doing your forensic work. We gave it the tables schema, and we asked to give us some sample queries, and and it gave us a bunch of different queries that we can use as an example to run. It even gave us some string matching related to date values and that sort of thing. So my point here, all I'm trying to show here is that, let's say you're not very strong in SQL or you're just learning it. That's okay. You can take your time, you know, build a table that you need. You can use these AI systems to help you understand how to do this entire process. All you really need to know with AI now, you just need to know kind of like what you're trying to do. And then you can go to AI and help it walk you through the steps to do it. So let's say you're not sure how to install MySQL as a Docker image on your system. That's okay. Just pull up Claude or ChatGPT and just tell it, hey, how do I walk me through? Give me the steps to install Docker on my MacBook and run a MySQL instance, and it will give you the step-by-step instructions on how to do that. And then say, okay, now I want to construct a table that I can import chat messages into. Like, walk me through the steps of how I should do that, and it will walk you through those steps on how to do that. And so the point is, like, what I'm trying to get at here is you have all these powerful systems and tools at your disposal that used to be blocked by the fact that it would take forever to just learn how to put all this stuff together. But now when you combine all these different things with AI, you could basically have the AI be this assistant that just basically walks you through how to do this stuff step by step. So anything that you haven't done before, anything that you may have been a little apprehensive in the past to learn or try to figure out, you now have basically a 100x way of learning that stuff, where you can significantly compress the amount of time it takes to utilize these different systems that maybe in the past you've been apprehensive about using. And this is what AI, I think we talk a lot about AI in the context of how it helps us review evidence, or how it may help us find evidence, and all this stuff, the stuff that, you know, the vendors out there are trying to do. They're trying to figure out how to get AI into their products so that it helps you review evidence or something. But I don't know if anybody's really talking about how to use AI to just enhance your own skill set and your own capabilities. As opposed to thinking about how AI is going to make your tool set better, like, start thinking about how AI is going to make you better. Like, how's it going to make you better and upgrade the skills that you have, or add skills that you don't have that you weren't able to get because you just didn't have time to learn it, or it's just so far outside, you know, something you're interested in that you never picked it up. with something like AI, it can basically make all these more powerful technologies a lot more accessible to you as a user.